What's up, horror fans? Pete here from the Lasser Cast, and we have another author interview. Now, this is an author that I have been super excited to talk to for months at this point. I'm talking about BEAU Johnson. His books, I don't know if you would label them straight up horror, but there are absolutely horror elements in them. And I know that he is talked about often in the horror crowd. So, BEAU, thank you so much for coming on to the Lasser Cast.
Peter, thanks for having me. I'm glad it happened.
Beau's series that he has put out is the Bishop Rider series, and Bishop, as we're a writer, as we go through this interview, you're going to find out. He can get kind of nasty with his targets. I read an interview that you had done a little while ago. It was for Do Some Damage, like the website Do Some
Mm,
Damage, and the
yep.
interviewer was Paul J. Garth, and he asked you when Bishop Rider first appeared in your mind. Now, you said
Hmm.
about 14 years ago, before the
Yes.
time of the interview. Um, you also said that it was right when you got back into writing. So I was wondering, what were you writing before you started writing Bishop Rider stories?
Oh, it was always like I've always said. King has been my touchstone for writing. I read Misery. It was the first book that I wrote or read, and it's always been King. So it was like sort of time travel, monster of the week, things like that. But then I stumbled upon crime fiction like Shotgun Honey and Out of the Gutter Online, and I fell in love with it. And that's how Ryder was the genesis of Ryder. First, it was his sister. I envisioned his sister in these six men in masks, and then I'm like, well, who would avenge her? And that was how Ryder was born.
There's 96 Bishop Rider stories, right?
Yes.
That's crazy.
I agree.
how,
I never
how long's
expected a 96. One time I wanted to get to an even 100, but then I felt like I would just be padding it to get the number, the stat.
it?
So 96 seems to be a good number to end on.
Well, how long does it take you to put together an entire Rider book?
Well, there's many answers to that. The first book, uh, 7 years, right? And
Yeah.
then after that, I would say the second book, 9 months. And then usually after that, it's always a year. There's usually about 15 months in between books. So
Yeah.
I can write like the last book, Old Man Rider. That was a weird process. I wrote it in two separate stages. I would say 4 months and then maybe 3 months. I didn't write for about 5 months, and then 3 months. The last half of the book just came to me. Yeah.
Mm. What happens during those like 5 months where you're not writing? Is it just that like the stories aren't popping in your head, or what's going on?
Well, I'm always thinking of, but I just don't want to. I try to like his story is connected, but I just don't want to feel like it's a forced connection. So I just try and
Mm,
I'm always writing in my head, right? I think we all are, us writers,
yeah.
trying to make it seem like we're not writing, I guess, right? So
Right.
a lot of that goes on, right? I'm a what if guy too, so it's not like I'm a plotter.
Right.
Yeah.
So like that's what kind of makes me so excited about your writing in general, right? Because what's very interesting about these books is that they're essentially like short stories, and there's so many of them per book, and yet they're all connected. I know that you've said that you've written them not necessarily in chronological order, but that you kind of tie them together when you put the book
Yep.
out. Um, like when you come up with a scenario for Ryder and for the characters that he's going to essentially dispense justice to, is it that
Yep.
like it's like what happened with his sister, like where it's like you saw the kind of the scenario and then you think about what the payback would be, or is it like you're thinking about a specific character?
Uh well, there's many ways. As I went longer in Ryder's story, I was sort of he's been killing a lot of people, but you don't want to be repetitious. So I tried to find different ways to kill people, and then that's how some of the stories generated just from the implements that he was going to use and be different. Sort of created a different setting or whatever, right? And
Right.
then, like I said, I in the second book I took the bottom part of his right leg because it started to feel like it was getting too easy for him. I needed some obstacles right there, right?
Right.
So even though some bad shit has happened to him, he got too good at what he was doing. So I needed to take him down a peg, so to speak.
I read somewhere, I think maybe it was either in a tweet or it might have even been like a TikTok video that you did, but basically you said that you just write the interesting parts or like the good parts of the stories, right?
Like I say, I'm bad at writing the boring parts. That's what
Better write
I'm
the boring
trying to
parts.
say with
Okay,
the
okay,
king. Yeah,
okay. Right. And see, to me, that's so appealing as a writer because I find that going to write, there's the stuff that I'm very eager to write, and then there's the stuff that like it has to essentially like bridge towards it. And I think that
yes,
with your books, you really have developed this system to where it's like you don't have the kind of filler stuff at all. It's just like
yeah.
here's this scenario, and like for writing anything besides Bishop Ryder, do you use that same approach, or is that like do you like hear Bishop Ryder's voice and that's what makes you write that way?
Yep.
Okay.
Yep, he was I wrote one other character similar to him, but he was more, which he ended up being his one of his later partner. It was his voice was a little more brash and talkative, and so that's the only one that's been similar. But the rest are, I've really, I think there was only one other story where I had the same character that I went back to. But Bishop's the only character I've ever really gone back to and done more stories about. Other ones have just been one offs.
Yeah.
The longest story I've
Eh,
ever written is 5,000 words. That's it. The boring parts, whatever, the connective tissue. I try to do that. I try to give you. You can only give so much exposition in a certain story. So I had to implement this unnamed narrator who is a helper of writers, but it's just from a different perspective, and it gets to fill in some of the exposition or the boring parts in a different way that doesn't, in to me, doesn't make it boring.
yeah.
It's
Well,
it's helpful to me to write that character differently than Ryder. Now, I've always joked too that Ryder gets a little upset when I make him a secondary character in his own narrative, but he's got to live with
yeah.
it. Yeah.
Yeah, well, I mean, the actual like language that you use and the narration itself reminds me very much of like Sin City and like kind of like Frank Miller's narration. Are you
Sure.
familiar with those comics or the movies?
Yep. I think I saw one of the movies. Was there a sequel, or was it
There's
just the
Sin
one movie?
City. There's Sin City, and that's directed by Robert Rodriguez. And there's the second one, which is like a Dame to Kill For and or Die For.
I think I just saw
And
the first one.
yeah,
Yep.
yeah. And they're all like because the way that Sin City works is it's essentially like little vignettes of stories of either cops or criminals or whatever in this kind of dark world. And that just reminds me of Ryder so much. And I love the language itself because like you describe horrible, horrible things happening, but it's never like this sort of like drawn out gratuitous thing. It's very much like very cleverly written.
Well, thank
Like
you.
how he dispatches the people. It's like it's like so focused on like a clever way of saying almost like a entendre versus like directly saying gory, gross things.
It's a conscious thing that I do. Yeah, it's sort of like it's almost like it's off screen, but not.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly, exactly. And like,
Yeah.
is that because you mentioned your influences a little bit earlier before, like crime fiction that you really got into? Um, are there specific writers that like kind of influenced that particular style?
But the one that always sticks out is Matthew C. Funk. I really enjoyed his stuff. And he was a clever short story writer too. Such a great voice. I don't think he writes anymore, but I wish he did.
Yeah,
And Ryan Sales at the beginning there. There was just so many. I'm trying to Nick Kolakowski, Angel Louise Colleen, like a lot of those guys. Like it was just, I was just, and I was stumbling too. You're always trying to find your own voice. And when I was, like I was saying, when I was doing the King stuff or the Monster of the Week and time travel, I liked it, but it just didn't feel like it felt when I found crime fiction and I found Ryder's voice. I'm like, oh man, I like this. And like I've always said too, I didn't realize that I was really telling the same story until the third or fourth story. I'm like, I'm writing about the same character. And then I realized that he's got legs. I have something here. Now, did I know it was going to be 96 stories? I can't say that I did, but at some point during all of them to burn in the editing process, that trailer for Infinity War came out, and
yeah.
Downey says part of the journey is the end. So I knew I was going to kill him. So then my choice was: does he go in a blaze of glory, or do I let him do what he does for 40 years? So I decided to give him 40 years of killing people.
Yeah. Oh my God. And it opens up the doors for like potential, sequel books and stuff like that. I know that like essentially this is the last Rider book that you're going to put together, but then there's an anthology coming too, right?
Crazy, yes, yeah, it's crazy that that's happening.
Yeah.
To have other people write a character I created, it boggles my mind. I'm very humble too, but I'm so excited.
Yeah. For anyone that's watching this video because they've sort of sought you out and they're looking up your work and stuff, and maybe they're interested in writing a Bishop Rider story, uh, could you tell them kind of like what the guidelines are for submitting?
Well, it best. I got about 2 pages of guidelines just to give you a rough. If you've never read Bishop Rider, so it's be best to just DM me on whatever Twitter or Facebook or whatever. Find me out, and I'll email you the particulars. That's
Yeah,
the easiest
nice.
way to do it. But it's anyways, the cutoff is going to be end of April of 2023 and published in October of 2023 by Down and Out Books. It's just set in the Bishop Rider universe. It doesn't have to be about Bishop Rider, but it should be somewhere. He should be in there somewhere. It doesn't have to be exactly him. It could be like an ancillary character. It could be from a different perspective, someone he's chasing, something like that. Whatever,
Yeah.
something different. Like I've gotten a few stories where I'm like, wow, I never thought I could take Rider that route, but some people did it, and there's some good stories already.
So you've gotten a bunch of responses so far. Yeah.
Oh, some of the people that we have lined up, if it comes out, if it happens, like, oh, it's crazy. Like Gabino Iglesias, Sean Cosby. Man, I there's a lot of people that I'm looking forward to reading their takes on Ryder or Ryder's universe.
You mentioned Gabino Iglesias, and I noticed that like you and him on Twitter sometimes like kind of go back and forth with each other, and he actually seems like a perfect kind of guy to write a writer story. Just the way that his because he is a horror guy, but he also does a lot of crime stuff too. I think he's a good match.
I would agree. I'm looking forward to it. I hope it happens. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. He blurred my third book. I was quite excited about that. Yeah.
Oh, nice, nice. So I was going to say that one last thing about Ryder too is that I've heard you compare him to the Punisher, or that people compare him to the Punisher, and I can
Yep.
see the similarities because horrible things have happened to his relatives, and it inspires him to hurt criminals, kill criminals, right? But I would say that his methods are different from the Punisher's, and what happens to his family members is different what happens to Frank Castle's family members. Would you say there's anything else that makes distinctions between Ryder and Frank Castle?
Well, no, I think you hit the nail on the head. Like I wanted to put my own spin on it, right? I just didn't, I try to stay away from the mafia stuff. I That's why I chose, because he goes into a lot of he does pedophiles too, and rapists, and but it's usually the mafia he's connected with. So I wanted to steer clear of that because I knew there would be comparisons eventually down the line. But I had him and Charles Bronson up with. That's where it really started from, right?
Mm,
But yeah, you can't deny that there's similarities between Ryder and Frank Castle. Like
yeah.
a funny story. My first story with Ryder in it, I paid a homage to Marvel Universe, and I called it For Frank. But my sister read the story, and she goes, "Well, who's Frank?" Because there was no Frank in the story. And when I had to explain it to her, I'm like, "Okay." So I changed the title, and I can't even remember what story that is now that had the For Frank title, but I tried.
Well, it's funny because with Ryder, he is like Frank Castle in the sense that he gives justice that you feel like might normally be denied, right? Like he gives justice to the truly worst people in society, like shitbirds, right? Like these horrible people, and he does horrible things to them.
Yes.
Um, it's funny because at least you appear to be like a very nice guy and very friendly and social, but you have this character that's so dark, and does some really kind of horrible things. um do you feel like it's sort of cathartic for you to write out this stuff to kind of deal with the real world?
Yes, totally. Yes.
Yeah.
And I've always said, when I've got that comparison before, like I'm doing my job, really, if I'm writing in that voice and I'm this person, right? But yeah, if I did this stuff in real life, I'd lose my family. I wouldn't be able to. So it's nice. Cathartic is the good way to say that I can do this in my own way through writing, because there is a lot of dirt bags and shit bags out there that get away with so much shit that they shouldn't. And
Yeah.
yeah, I'd like to take a hammer to some of them for sure.
Yeah, that's the main thing, right? Because about 2 years ago, or like when COVID was just starting, I got into horror really hardcore. Because especially because the Twitter hardcore. I mean the not the hard, the Twitter horror community, right? And then that's where I
Yeah.
started to see your stuff. I would see your TikToks, I would see your Twitter posts, and you do this phenomenal job of promoting other people and promoting your work. And I almost feel like you actually promote other people more than you promote yourself.
I would, yeah, I have this 80-20 rule, which I've always said I bend when I have a new book coming out, and there's usually maybe 50-50. But yeah,
Mhm.
it's all started as a pay it forward thing. I went to this book con, Boucher Con in 2017, and I was such a newbie, a green, and a few of these writers took me under their wing. So I started, I'm like, I want to say thank you. I bought their books, and then I made pictures of their books, and people seemed to like it. And then it just snowballed from there, turned into these videos. I used to call the Monday Love, and then Do Some Damage contacted me and said, "Do you want to come on as a contributor?" And that's how Not Bo's Book Nook started. And yeah,
Yeah.
it's just a big old snowball. So, and I see other people doing it too, but yeah, I enjoy it. And no one else is going to promote my stuff. I don't have an agent. I don't have a marketing budget. I have this phone, I say, so I do what I can.
Yeah. Well, I know that like within the past like 2 or 3 months, there's definitely been a big push for writers to get on TikTok. Like they feel like that's their way to promote. And I feel like you're just like light years ahead of them because you are like, you're wearing your mustache and then you have like a wig on in some of them. You're sitting on the toilet. You're like, doing all these different random things in your TikToks
Yeah.
and you have different songs playing. I mean, there's special effects. It's just like super impressive. And like first off, I was going to ask you because you are promoting other people's stuff. Like, how long does it take you to read a book?
Well, I can usually, maybe I'd say on average 10 days is my, yeah.
Oh, okay. Yeah,
I'm
yeah,
always
that's
an hour before I go to bed. I read an hour before I go to bed. And if it's a book that's really has a hold of me, I'll stretch the time, right?
yeah.
Yeah.
Because like it just seems like you're like putting out video after video of like other people's books, and then your own too.
Yeah, but then
Um,
sometimes in between, I have to, because I can't. I try and do the weekly grind, and sometimes I have to take weeks off because I've caught up to myself. Or sometimes I'll go back to other books that I've read, and I'll do a different video, or I'll add some together. These are some books that I've read in the past, and put 12 books together. Or just recently, I did my TBR pile because they get no love really. I buy them, I give them a pick, and then they sit there for. I have books that I am well into 2025 now that people have sent me, which I enjoy that people send me books, but I cannot guarantee that I'm going to read it, but at least I can give it a pick, or
yeah,
sometimes I'll put it in a video. And if I do, like the book, I read it and I like it, I will do a video. I have no problem doing that. I like to promote, but if I, that's the thing too. If I don't like a book, I'm not going to really make a video, or I'll review it, but they can find it, but I'm not going to tag an author in any negative light. Right. I'll just say it wasn't for me, right? Because not all books are for everybody.
right. I totally empathize because there are authors that like reach out to me and stuff and want to be on the show or like I contact and stuff and I get super excited to talk to everyone, but not every single book is like this thing that totally hooks me right away,
Yeah.
and I think that like with your stories, what's interesting about the Bishop Ryder books is that I actually have not read a lot of crime fiction, and because of reading Bishop Ryder, it kind of makes me want to read just like straight up crime fiction versus horror, which I've spent most of my time on in the past 2 years. So like um right now, is there anything that is like kind of what you say like contemporary to Bishop Ryder, or like if people like Bishop Ryder, they should check out these books too?
Yeah. Well, I would say Laird Barron's Isaiah Coleridge series, like that is, whew, has some good stuff there. I like that, and like of course, Ennis's run on the Punisher is classic, and
Ah,
Bendis's and Maleev's run on Daredevil. I would say if you want, like it's just so good, so good. Yeah, I'll always recommend that. Yeah.
see, Bo, that's the reason why I love your stuff so much, man. Because I love Ennis's run on the Punisher, and I
Yes.
love Bendis's run on Daredevil too. That's like one of my favorite Daredevil runs. But Daredevil's crazy because there's like so many good runs.
Oh yes.
Like
I think Brubaker followed him, and I don't think I read all of that because I started having kids, and something had to give, and comics were one of them. So yeah. But
right.
anyways, I still have the Punisher, and once in a while I break them out, but it's been a few years since I've read them. But oh man, So good.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's probably why I like your story so much because it's the narration, like I said before with Sin City, but that's just a natural comic book thing where, there's always these sort of like play on words to describe the violence, and I think that that's what you do. I mean, you straight up describe the violence too, but there's always this clever description of it, which it always reminds me of a comic. So I think that's probably
Yeah.
why I dig it so much.
Well, thank you. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, I was going to say that you've also kind of talked about shows and you've given them reviews, just like you give book reviews, and you'll say, "Oh, it's Seven Mustaches" or whatever. You'll give it a review like that. Um,
Yeah.
you talked about the show Dark once. You recommended that to me, and then
Yes.
recently you've been talking about Lost.
Yep.
And I feel like both of these have to do with like time travel and like alternate realities and things like that. Um, you mentioned earlier that you kind of had interest in that type of story writing. Do you think you would ever attempt something like that in the future?
Uh, well, I'll never say never. Like in that first book of mine, I think there's a couple time travel stories in there and some monsters of the week. I think I remember a vampire that infiltrated a an old group home, something like that. But yeah, I'll never say never, right? I'm always going to write. I'm done with publishing, but I'm always going to write. So yeah, if the idea strikes, yeah, for sure.
Nice,
But
nice.
yeah, I lately, I don't know what me and my one boy were watching on Lost, and it started me thinking about Lost again. And oh man, when that show first came out, man, I was obsessed. Such a good
Yes.
show. Yeah.
It's funny because you did a little poll. I mean, I kind of sound like a stalker talking about like all the things you do on Twitter. But it's like I see your stuff the most in my feed, and so you did this like poll where you listed these lost moments and people could click on, what they was their favorite moment. And
Yeah.
honestly, I didn't remember each moment you described.
Hmm.
For me, when I think of like peak Lost, I think like season 3 when they're with the others and Jack has to do the surgery on Ben. Like that,
Sure.
I feel like that's man, that's prime time stuff right there.
Yeah. Or
Yeah,
when you at the beginning of opening of season 3, when you see it from the other's perspective in the plane breaking up. Oh,
yeah,
I love other perspectives, seeing the same thing a different way, and that when it's done, it's that good. Oh, makes me
yeah,
come back week after week.
yeah, yeah,
Like I remember sitting with my wife, two things, when the pilot came out, and we watched that, and I liked it more, of course. And I'm just like, what did we just watch?
right.
And then at the end of season 3, when Kate gets out of that car, I'm like, what? They knew each other before. Oh, they're off the island. Oh
Yeah,
man, it was
yeah,
so good. And I heard that we could have been spoiled because they watched it earlier on whatever coast, and I'm glad I wasn't spoiled because that would have just taken all the air out of it if I'd have known, right?
right.
Yeah.
Uh, I mean, you did mention that like the show kind of dips in quality eventually, and
Yeah,
but
season 6 is not my favorite.
yeah, right, right. I do appreciate the ending though. I like the very last
Oh,
episode.
the finale. No, the finale is by far one of the best finales out there. I know it gets a lot of hate, but you know what? It was a good finale. And
Heck yeah.
I'll die on that hill. Yeah.
Yeah. Have you ever watched the show Yellow Jackets by any chance?
Yep. It
Okay.
tries to be lost.
Right, right. I was gonna say it's
Yeah.
very similar to Lost. Yeah, yeah,
Hmm.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. We're talking about all these different shows and stuff like that, but has anyone ever approached you about adapting Rider into like a show or a movie?
Well, many people have mentioned it.
Yeah,
I'd like to see it come to fruition for sure, like anyone, but I just don't know if it will. Like again, I think I need to have an agent, a marketing budget to get to break through to wherever I need to get it
yeah.
in front of somebody. So unless that happens, I think I'm just gonna sell my little books. Yeah. Yeah.
Right, right. Um, if it was ever to be adapted, pie in the sky kind of thing, right? But if it ever
Yeah.
was, do you feel like it would be kind of labeled as a horror movie, even though it's crime fiction, kind of the way that like Seven, a lot of people label Seven a horror movie, even though it's like a thriller or a detective story?
Totally. I say I've crime and horror, I say are cousins. And I think I ride the line between the two. I know it's not quite monsters, but they're human monsters, I've always said, right? So
Yeah,
yeah. Yeah, I would seven for sure. Yeah, it'd be that dark. Yeah.
yeah, absolutely. Like usually when we get towards the end, if you want to like just kind of plug where people can find you and like where they can find your work.
Oh, sure. Yeah. Well, as of tomorrow, my tweets are going to be suppressed because I'm not paying the $8 to whatever
Yeah, yeah,
Musk. Jesus
yeah.
Christ. Anyways, but I'm on Twitter, BEAU Johnson 44, TikTok, BEAU Johnson 44, Instagram, BEAU Justin Johnson, and Facebook is Old Man BEAU Johnson, because
Nice,
Facebook's for the
nice.
older people now. And yeah, my books, Amazon, Barnes and Nobles, Down and Out website, some libraries down in New Zealand now, so that's pretty cool. Yeah,
That is
that's
awesome.
pretty far. I've never been that far. Yeah.
Yeah. Bo, I really appreciate you coming on the show. I mean, if you can't tell, I'm a big fan, and I just think that kind of what you do for the writing community is it's just like this very positive thing. And so, you know, I'm very grateful, and I think that a lot of other writers are very grateful. So, I mean, thank you so much for coming on the show.
Well, thanks,
And
Peter. But I just want to say, like, I benefit from it. I benefit from it too. You know, it's a two-way street. You know, so everybody sometimes thinks that I'm very altruistic, but I am. But at the same time, I'm trying to do my own thing too, right?
yeah,
Yeah.
that's true.
But no, I appreciate the comment.
Cool, man. And
Yeah.
you know, when the first Rider movie comes out, if you want to come
Oh,
on and talk to me and Danny, and
yeah.
then he'll actually watch it. Yeah.
Oh,
Cool, man. Well,
that
thank you
would be
so much.
awesome. Yeah.
All right, we'll see you next time then.
Okay. Thanks, Peter.
Yeah.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Yeah. So.